And how do you manage the agents they can provide different answers, right? So they could hallucinate and they can come up with they can make decisions, right? Whether they could be, higher quality or lower quality decision process. But at the end of the day, it's a non-deterministic process, right? Whereas on the business, we want a more deterministic process, right? How do you manage that to reduce the risk for enterprise?
No, it's a good question. I think it all boils down to how you choose to design your agentic framework. Like, for example, in our world, when we design, and I can't talk for all products here, but at least on our platform, right up front, when you design the agentic process, you get to define the degree to which you want it to be deterministic versus probabilistic, right? You can set your temperature controls. You can do all of that upfront, right? So it is a very, very important part of how you choose to design it, which I think is incredibly important to be able to define deterministic versus probabilistic choices that you make based on the work you do. For example, if we're talking about things that need to be deterministic. Yes, from a coding perspective, absolutely. But if you're doing product discovery, you're trying to do idea brainstorming with product managers, you don't want to be too deterministic. You actually want a little bit of probabilistic there, right? And so I think the choices we make are very important. Having a agentic design framework through which you can actually manage and control these choices are very important. But ultimately, it's going to come down to contextualization and learning. I just don't feel like enough organizations that decide to go forward with agentic AI and LLMs spend enough of a time on contextualization. We need to spend a lot of time on contextualization. And, people have to define their own domain context and domain models through which they're able to drive this, right? With the client that we're working with, we're spending a ton of time getting the contextualization right. We've got 25 to 30 work streams through which we are implementing contextualization, even before we open up the platform for everybody to use, right? To your point, for some reason, and it's just, we're all party to it. Humans tend to hold technology to a higher standard than they hold themselves, which is true. And so, it's okay if the human makes mistakes, we give them like a couple of months, but the first time that the model has it hallucinates, it's out. And so, unfortunately, that's the reality that we learn to deal with. But, the only way to deal with that is to spend a tremendous amount of time on contextualization, cross contextualization, and so on.
Right, right. It could be statistically more accurate than humans, but one mistake and it's aha.
I always joke about this, right? I mean, there are, and I mean this only, I don't mean this in the wrong way. But, somebody drives a car and rams into rams into 5 people. That's on page 5 or 6. A self-driving car happens to touch some person walking with a little bag. That's front page news.
Right, right.
So, so we do tend to hold technology to a higher standard than we hold ourselves.